Hey, Courtney.
Hey, good evening. My name's Courtney and I'm an alcoholic. Um, I am I am super grateful to be here tonight. And I did get a chance to answer the phone when Sam called, which is great. Um, Somebody a while back once said that alcoholism is a disease of moments, and as in like the moment that you have right now is the only one you're gonna get, and what happens in that moment can mean maybe a lifetime of sobriety and maybe no sobriety at all, and that somehow made a lot of sense to me. And the truth is that Sam caught me maybe at the right moment. If he had called me a moment earlier, he might have found somebody that couldn't remember the last time they went to a meeting, hadn't called their sponsor at the assigned time for about 2 weeks, had noticed that about half of her sponsees disappeared, and didn't much care. And if he had called me at a different moment, he might have found somebody who thought they knew everything there was to know about this thing and was really eager to tell you all about it. And was really passionate for the message of Alcoholics Anonymous and was going to tell you that you should do it my way. And if you don't do it my way, you're going to drink and die. Um, but he caught me at the moment where I just said yes. And I got a chance to listen to a couple of previous meetings of this group, and I'm just really grateful to have found it. Not necessarily to talk. I'm not looking forward to that part much at all, but um, to be a part of folks that I feel like are really in the thick of it. Um, and I think that this essay is like, one of those more underrated aspects of AA literature. So I my sobriety date is July 20th of 2007. Um, I currently live in Brooklyn, New York, and I've lived there since August of 2019. And that moving to Brooklyn from Denver about a year ago seemed like a really good idea at the time. And I have prayed a prayer pretty consistently that's in my smallest moments. It sounds exactly the same as in my most graceful moments. And that is, God, why did you move me into the middle of a pandemic? And when I say that is my prayer in my smallest moments, I'm praying from this place of like, what'd you do that to me for? And in my most graceful moments, I'm really asking for God to show me, what is it that I should do? Who is it that I should be? And I I think that there's a lot of gifts that come with alcoholism, and I think that one of my favorite gifts that comes with alcoholism is that we get this gift of extremely low expectations. And before I go any further, I just want to encourage everyone to like get cozy with any low expectations you might have for what's going to transpire in the next 30 minutes to an hour. Is that right, Sam? Okay. That seems like an awfully large window. So I got sober and I had really definite ideas about God. I had known God. I had known a God that loved me. I had known prayer and I had known meditation and I had known a closeness and had a huge heart for God as a small person. And the person who wrote The Varieties of Religious Experience, William James, he writes in that book that the kind of person who grows up and is a kid and has this huge heart for God, usually what happens is they grow up and they don't really get that back. And so my beginning years of sobriety felt a lot like that. They felt a lot like I was endeavoring into this relationship with a power greater than me. And I was checking boxes and I was doing things and I was staying sober. And I was doing things like going back to school, right? And I was doing things like telling the truth. And I was doing things like showing up when I said I was going to show up. And that felt all well and good. But in terms of like that feeling of connection, that deep feeling of purpose, that deep feeling of peace and ease, regardless of my circumstances, it felt like I was working really hard to manufacture that. And so for me, what happened inside of Alcoholics Anonymous is a bunch of stuff, right? The most important thing that happened first was that I was relieved of the compulsion to drink alcohol, right? And that wasn't an accident, right? You told me that that was going to happen if I had what you had. And it turns out I do have what you have. I have a disease that centers in my mind, whether I drink a drop or not. And what happened for me is I became aware after it had occurred that I hadn't been thinking about drinking and that I hadn't been thinking about not drinking and that I was just being. And that felt like the weight of that miracle was palpable once I became aware of it, right? And there was a very different experience that I found so I was coming to AA because I had a drinking problem and you guys were helping me with my drinking problem. And that's all I knew. And that's all I was looking for until I ended up at a home group. I became attracted to more than just not drinking, because what I saw in my home group were people who were actually like practicing principles in all of their affairs. So like, I didn't think we were serious about that. I just didn't think that we were serious about that. So when I saw a man with like 30 years of sobriety being a greeter at the meeting, I was appalled, right? I was like, this guy, he doesn't have anything better to do, right? And then there were other things where it was like, if you chaired the meeting, your job was to read the instructions with the weekly or with the monthly chair. This guy had chaired the meeting probably 1,000 times. And when I was the monthly chair, he looked at me and he said, well, Courtney, I think what we should do is follow the directions. And so I read with this man who's been a founding member of this group, the format of the meeting, because that's what we were supposed to do. And so those types of practices, those types of people were like radical in my mind. And what happened for me is I actually became attracted to this idea of trying to practice principles in all of my affairs. And what I first got hip to is like my defects of character went from like right here to right here, right? And I realized that it was tough. I realized that it was hard, and I couldn't understand why we were doing it, right? Until I became really painfully aware of the limitations of me working steps at my problems, right? And so I had been in a relationship that I knew was wrong, and I knew that I had no business being in it, and I didn't know what to do. And when I say I didn't know what to do, I mean that, right? And so what would happen is there would be a fight or a problem inside this relationship, and I would 10-step it, and I would look for my wrong, and I would alleviate that, right? I would go through the steps. I would pray and ask God to remove the feeling immediately. I would call somebody. I would find out where I could make amends. I would make those amends, and then I would continue on. And this problem kept coming up, right? This problem kept coming up. And instead of continuing to like 10-step at this relationship, I just stopped 10-stepping it. Because I realized that if I 10-stepped it more, then eventually I was going to have to change. And if I was going to change, I was going to have to leave. And if I was going to leave, then I wasn't going to be okay. Now, there's this thing that happens when I talk to alcoholics about their fears, and I recognize it because I have it, right? And what it sounds like is I'm really afraid of this thing, right? This thing that's about to happen. I'm really afraid about this thing that's going to happen. I'm going to lose something. I'm going to get punished, whatever it is. A lot of times, if I look really closely at that, the wheels are already in motion for that thing, right? So what that means to me today is like, I haven't had a drink in a while, right? But I know for a fact that I'm just as alcoholic as I was when I walked in here. And I believe that I have a disease that centers in my mind, whether I drink a drop or not. So when I die, I will be just as alcoholic as I was the first day that I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't shake this thing. So I get that. But I have a brain which tells me like, I'm afraid of this external thing. I don't have the ability to see my own stuff and walk myself through it, right? I have a brain that'll tell me like, I'm afraid of this external thing, when the reality is like the wheels for those events are sometimes already in motion, right? And so looking at my fears in a different way, I'm able to with God's help and through the gift of sponsorship, actually see what's my job and what's God's job, right? So I could just like work a step at something and I could probably be okay, right? Or I could actually like have a radically spiritual experience, which is usually starts with like me just admitting the truth, right? And so that relationship, shocker, that relationship didn't work out. It ended up ending, and I went into this period of my life where I did a lot. I had strayed away from my home group. I got a service position. I was the coffee maker, and it put me in the right place at the right time, which means it just put me in my home group in a way that felt really meaningful. And I hated it and I didn't want it. And that's not the part that matters. The part is that like God put me exactly right where I was, right? And then I also started doing this thing where I was like running a lot. And I was training for this very long running race. It was a 100-mile running race. And I would just run, right? I would run for 6 hours on Saturday and I would run for 8 hours on Sunday. And I would talk to alcoholics while I ran. And I would just say like, hey, are you okay if I'm panting the whole time? And then most of the time they're like, yeah, you know? And so I was running and I was praying and I was talking to drunks. And I had it all figured out, right? I was never going to love anybody again, right? It seemed like an okay thing, right? And so I was going to always run a 100-mile race in August. That means I had to run a lot from January until August. And then I was going to eat a lot in September. In October, it was Halloween, which was my favorite holiday. November's Thanksgiving. I got nieces and nephews, so that takes care of December and Christmas. And then it's January again, right? And so I felt like what I did was I wrote my life, right? I'm never going to take a risk again because you loved really hard and then you got hurt. So you just don't do that again. And I'm right in the center of Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm sponsoring people and I'm telling them how great of a job I'm doing at this stuff. And the idea that I have made no room for a power greater than myself to love me, to hold me, to guide me, to fall and help me get back up, it never occurs to me. So right after I ran the 100-mile race, I'm going to tell this story. I don't know where he is, but I'm going to tell this story. I don't make a habit of this, but I make exceptions for Gary. So I was, right after I had run this 100-mile race, I had this whole plan for how I was going to manage the rest of my life. And it didn't seem so bad, right? I had good intentions. And I meet Gary for the first time. And I know who Gary is because, like, I'm supposed to, right? And I know Gary. Gary doesn't know me. And so I'm real nervous. And in general, I got a lot of nervous energy. And so Gary and I were talking at the same thing. And we were at this place for like a weekend. And so if you were talking, you stayed in the same house as all the other people that were talking. So me and Gary were like roommates for the weekend. And I was really nervous. And I found myself in the living room of this house. It's just me and Gary, which is uncomfortable for me because like anytime I have to interact with a human being, I feel incredibly insecure. And so we're just like chatting about the weather and the sunshine and stuff like that. And I start to stand up because I think that we're done. And Gary leans back in his chair. And what he says is, he says, you know, you're kind of a bitch, but you're not trying to be. And the thing that Gary said to me was absolutely 100% true and incredibly offensive, right? And so I share that because like, that's a real gem in Alcoholics Anonymous, that somebody's willing to tell you the truth, right? And I believe that what he did is he told me the truth with some compassion. He says, you kind of come off like a bitch, but I understand you're not trying to be. And he said, you run a lot, right? And I said, yeah. And he was like, so you're alone a lot. Now, I don't think I'm alone a lot. I'm right in the center of Alcoholics Anonymous. I love attention. I have a loud mouth, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. But all of a sudden, when Gary says it to me, it makes perfect sense. Like, yeah, I am alone a lot. And Gary and I, like, go straight down like alcoholics do. Like, we go straight down to the stuff that matters, and we get in that deep stuff, and like, we're there. And all of a sudden, I'm, like, really hearing things in a different way. And at the end of that conversation, Gary was like, you know, why don't you try, like, an AA potluck or something? Like, I would rather get beat up and go to the dentist than go to an AA potluck, right? So I kind of knew that he was onto something, right? And so I share that story, like, one, because it's funny, like, two, because I absolutely love Gary and I'm going to cherish that moment for the rest of my life. But three, because none of the stuff that we do matters at all unless I'm a person living in the world with the people, right? And I understand how to behave for 10 minutes before a meeting, and 10 minutes after a meeting. But what does it actually look like when I'm a person in the world with the people? What does it look like when I'm not controlling every ounce of my time, right? When I'm like open and available for things not to go my way, for disappointment, for joy, and for things like that. It was super impactful because somebody was like willing to tell me the truth, and I was like in a place where I could listen, right? And in that moment, things got really different for me. And so I started to approach some of my problems in like a really different way. And what I mean by that is like, I just didn't drink and I remained open. And in remaining open and not drinking, like sometimes like just by not dying, like we're given like another chance to practice this stuff. And so I started to look at the relationship that had ended really differently, right? I knew that the thing that was going to kill me in that relationship is that the way that I had told the story was like, yes, I was wrong, but she was wronger. And I couldn't muster enough power to change that. And I knew it was a problem, but I couldn't do it, right? And so what happened is that like I really got to understand like how Bill talks about like dependence means demand, right? Dependence means demand. I could always look at that person and say that their character defects were more glaring than mine. Dependence means demand. What did I get from being the good guy? What did I get from being the person that actually worked a program? What did I get from all of the times I didn't say the thing that I wanted to say, right? I take solace in like the low expectations of my behavior, right? I understand that there's a big difference between me living and practicing principles, actually practicing principles in my affairs and saying things like, well, I didn't drink today, right? I understand that that's important. And it's not that I'm going to minimize that, but I recognize that like I run out of those tickets. And so for me, when I start to tell those types of stories, what I recognize is that I'm trying to stay sober on the spiritual experience of yesterday. And if I'm really honest, like it was like my pride and my ego that was messed with, because like what I desperately didn't want is to be the person with the kind of problems that I had. And so one thing that I talk a lot about is that like, it's not so much my problem today that is the thing that plagues me, as much as a lot of times it's my relationship to the problem. It's my relationship to the things. Just like it wasn't really booze, but it was my relationship to the booze. Just like it's not really my wife, it's my relationship to her behavior. It's my relationship to the expectations I have about sharing a 900 square foot apartment. It's the expectations I have about how much furniture can fit inside of a 900 square foot apartment. It's the expectations that I thought that we were going to get married and then have a blissful life, but then a global pandemic happened and now we're like really inside of our, it's close, right? It's close. When I start to think about the things that like I take the most comfort in, I think a lot about like, I think it's in the 6th or the 7th step inside of the 12 and 12, where it talks about how we seek comfort in the study of our defects, how we seek the comfort. And that's something that's like always really resonated in me, for me. I have, I'm gonna check this real fast. You guys are doing so great, by the way. Really impressed with everybody here.
We love you, Courtney.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah. I can, for whatever reason, in sponsorship, I have a lot of people that come to me seeking a different experience in sponsorship, and before they come to me, their experience looks like I've been sober this amount of time, and I've like worked the steps out of the book. I'm very clear about what I'm supposed to do, and I feel not great. And I think that that's something that can happen to us. I think that that's something that can feel a little different for folks who've been brought up in like big book AA, that have been really clear on what it is to be a sober and active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. It just seems like it's something that happens where we do the things that we're supposed to do, and we feel the different things that we feel. And then we get to a point like Bill describes in the essay where like on the hour, he's looking at the St. Francis prayer, and what's happening is he's wondering why it's not working, right? And so when he starts to talk about this idea of love, this idea of being okay means being absolutely willing and able to give it all back, to demonstrate it to the folks that I come into contact with out in the world. I have to say that that's a thing that like on its face is really terrifying for me. I'm not somebody who skips through the New York City and just spreads love and joy. And if I was, I would recognize that I'm probably doing that because somebody's watching, right? So I have a weird work history. I have been a person who has had a career in education and been somebody who's completely over-identified their self with what they do. And I made a super conscious decision 3 years ago to leave education. And I was gonna leave it because I had set out 33 goals when I took this position. And in the space of my time there, I met all the goals. I achieved all of the goals. And this place was like a dumpster fire of a disaster mess. And I'm somebody who's like, if you have a job where you're like, this thing is never going to get right, there's no way to fix it, I'm the first in line for that, right? Like the worse it is, the better, the more I want it. Like I'm going to be the hero and I need it in order to be okay. And I understand that like I'm somebody who like in terms of professional stuff, if it's not hard, I get bored really easy. And so I recognized that there were some flaws in the way that I identified my worth with what I did. And so I had this intuitive thought that I was going to quit the job. And so I quit the job, and I had zero plan for what to do next, except for I dutifully showed up to my meditation cushion every day. And I listened, and I waited for God to tell me what was to become next, right? Now, to be clear, I'm not somebody who like, I believe God talks to me. I'm not somebody who like identifies with like the sky is parting or a burning bush experience. Like, no, but I was certain that that was going to happen because I knew that what I was doing was the right thing. And of course, God did not reveal to me what great job I was going to do next. Now, when I prayed that prayer, God, tell me what to do next, what I had in my head was 6 figures. Never made 6 figures before. 6 figures for sure, you know, definitely in the C-suite, you know. I'm gonna wear pants every day and nice outfits. I mean, I think I should probably have like 5 suits. You know, I really like wearing a suit, so I want to wear 5 suits. You know, every day of the week have a different one I can mix and match. Maybe that'll be great. Now, I'm alcoholic, which means like I have one side of the brain that writes the business, and then the other side of the brain like signs off on it like absolute fact, right? And so as I dutifully show up to the meditation cushion, there's no intuitive thought that shows up about like, this is what you do next, right? And what happens is like I get kind of sour, and then I start just taking whatever comes my way, right? And as these jobs come my way, what happens is I don't like them. I don't even want them. But what I do is I pour my whole self into it as if it was the most thing, it was as if it was something I was so passionate about. I give until there's nothing left to give for something I don't even enjoy, right? So this question that's brought up in the essay about like rectifying the wants with the emotional outcome is really not spiritual kindergarten for me, right? And it's not something that I'm super great at articulating. I can certainly like polka dot my checkered past for folks to say like, this is what you don't do, right? And so, you know, like that led to another thing that led to another thing, which ended up with like my wife's career is what brought us to New York, like just over a year ago. And as we moved to New York, I had these jobs that I felt really mediocre about. And the way that I sort of like squared that was like, well, it's a good time to leave town, right? Like I don't have like I got to shake these jobs I don't really care about. And so I show up to New York and I'm kind of like tapping my fingers, like looking around, waiting for the next intuitive thought to save me from my own self. And it doesn't come, and it doesn't come, and it doesn't come. And so I start some passion projects, and it seems like those things are going to really turn out, right? Seems like those things are going to really turn out. So I throw myself into that because this is actually what I really want to do, right? What I really want to do is comedy, right? So I start doing comedy and things are looking good and things are popping in my direction and I'm sort of getting noticed. And on February 28th, I have this really pretty good set and these people, they notice it. And so that set turns into like a bunch of different opportunities and then the world shuts down around March, right? Now I'm in this position that's really familiar, which is like, see, you tried, it got taken away, don't ever try. That's a road that's super available to me, right? The other one is like, this happened at me, right? And the third way is the way that I don't know anything about, right? The third way is that I don't know anything about. Who am I if you take either a job I'm overly passionate about, a job I don't care about, or a passion project? If you take all of those things away from me, like, do I have value? Do I bring anything to the table? What is it, right? And so if I think about this in terms of like dependence as a demand, do I demand that life treats me differently because I practice spiritual principles? Are there times when I find that the world has like something has not gone my way? Does my head sometimes go to like, I can't believe this happened. I prayed today. I talked to 4 alcoholics. I even listened to a 5th step. Again, do you have any idea how many inventories I've listened during this pandemic? It's like really getting old, right? Sometimes I'll go to that place where I'm like, I can't believe this happened. I prayed, right? Now I know intellectually that's not right, but the thing is, it's so subtle that there's rarely a time that I even get to notice these things, right? So when that man years and years and years ago said, this is a disease of moments, Courtney, it captured my attention and it's come to have more meaning. It's come to have way more meaning, way more importance for me today as I stay sober and I continue to live. I have no idea what I want to be when I grow up. What happened is my wife and I got really sick of each other living in a 900 square foot apartment, and my sponsee got me a job working for a moving company. So now I carry mattresses and boxes up 4-flight walk-ups and I drive a truck around New York City. My mom really wants to know what I'm doing with both my degrees, and I kind of do too. I took the job because it was like we were going to kill each other if I stayed in the apartment any longer, right? Because she's got a real job, right? So she like works here, right? And I just make noise. And apparently when I do housework, my housewifery is very noisy. I'm a hummer, I'm a stomper. I can't do laundry quietly. I can't put the dishes away quietly. Like I had to get out of the house. And so now I'm working for a moving company and like, it doesn't feel great. But there's parts of me that like absolutely like actually like love it for right now, right? It's not like something that I want to do for a career, but it's like really meaningful. I'm definitely out in the world with the people. And the reason that it matters to me to be out in the world with the people is because that's where like I actually get to see what's my job and what's God's job. That's where the story comes to life, right? So today I was driving the truck. There was an ambulance double parked. I tried to scoot through between the parked cars and the ambulance double parked, and I knocked somebody's mirror off. Now, there was never a question of whether or not I was going to go back and write a note saying, hey, I ruined your mirror. But when the ambulance drove by me to tell me I had hit the mirror, I did not react sanely and normally. I was not calm. I was not open. I did not appreciate the feedback that I had, in fact, damaged the mirror. I also noticed that they had been eating a cheeseburger and not really responding to any emergency of any kind. And so I get resentful at people for not knowing how hard it is to be me. Like, if you had any idea what it was like to be me, you'd be so drunk right now, right? But in my opinion, those are the moments that start to take hold and take meaning. What do I recognize in myself when I'm mad at the ambulance driver for pointing out the obvious? What I notice is that I'm trying to do this because I want credit, that I'm trying to sell myself on this idea that I'm good enough, right? And I recognize that there's a radical idea. And the radical idea is that God's got me regardless of if I hit the mirror or not. God's got me regardless of if the ambulance driver responds to an emergency, eats a cheeseburger, moves the car, doesn't move the car, all of those things. And those things, like, this is like a silly, for sure, it's like a silly example. But those are the moments in which, like, they make all the difference for me. Like, what I was able to recognize in that moment is that I'm not in alignment, right? I recognize that I'm not in alignment. And so, like, my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous is like, does it get better? Yeah. But is that like how I would really articulate it? I don't know. Like, yes, absolutely, it gets better for sure. But my experience looks a lot like falling down and getting back up with help. Falling down and getting back up with help. I have this ridiculous expectation that I should be able to practice spiritual principles all the time. So sometimes I show up to AA, and what I hear you say, whether it's true or not, is what I hear you say is that you have an easy time of this, that you're not having trouble going to digital meetings, that you definitely call your sponsor all the time, that you definitely skip right to your prayer and meditation in the morning, and that your first thought isn't resentment that the dog has to go out or that the lights are off or the paper's late. Like, I will bring that alcoholic mind to anything to tell the stories about how I'm different and how I'm not worth it. And so what I recognize is, like, either the story's totally right and I'm a dirtbag and I was brought to Alcoholics Anonymous and I was relieved of the compulsion to drink, and I was able to go to that same God in step 6 and 7 and become entirely willing to have these defects removed. And I was given the willingness and the grace to pursue those that I'd harmed and made amends to as a direct result of God, just to find out that I'm a dirtbag. Or that it's in the struggle that the emotional sobriety becomes real. That the struggle is where the real is. I don't know that there's another place in the world where your liabilities get to become your assets. But I recognize that that's something that can happen inside of Alcoholics Anonymous. My greatest mistakes have sometimes been the most helpful thing to give away, to tell the truth. I don't know that you can get that other places, but I know that I've gotten that here. And I recognize what that does for my frame of mind. My frame of mind is one where I go out into the world, and even on, like, my not greatest days, what I recognize is there are people. And, like, if you stay sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, you get this beautiful gift of seeing people, like, come from the worst place, the bottom, and they come up, right? And they come up, and the things that get me more than anything is, like, watching somebody else, like, string together days, watching somebody else take a service position in a group, watching somebody else re-engage with their family. And I recognize that I take that frame of mind outside to the world sometimes. And sometimes I see it really rosy, and I see people for who they are and where they're going to be. And what I recognize today is, like, this really beautiful spiritual axiom that, like, anything is actually possible. That anything is actually possible. And so for all the struggles that I have, I feel like what I'm left with is this crazy amount of faith in humanity, where maybe that seems ridiculous right now. Maybe it seems like that stuff is in short supply. When I recognize and work from the place of the gifts that I've been given, like it's a practice for me today that I be grateful for all that's been given and all that's been taken away. And I don't mean just like the defects that have been taken away. I mean the things that I've had to grieve, the things that I feel like I have lost, right? Because what I want my story to be is one where I'm the protagonist of it. One in which that like I understand what my job is, I understand what God's job is, and that those things is like that's like an unearthing and an unleveling process. I don't think that like the expectation that I'm firmly planted on the ground and that like I constantly know what the next right thought is, or I constantly take the next right action. I don't think that those kinds of expectations do me any favors. So when Bill talks about being victim of the depression, the kind of depression that like you don't have a good reason for it, just depression, right? Just the autumn kind of depression. I can relate to that. But what's more impactful for me is that I live with this expectation that like that's wrong and that's bad and that I should fix it, that I caused it, and that I am going to have to be the one that makes it go away. And what I realize is like the reason that my liabilities can become my assets is like that only gets to happen when I recognize just how willing I am to not be the one that fixes it. And so where that's like shown up like lately is in my 11th step. So for a long time, like I struggled with meditation. And what I mean by that is like I struggled to actually meditate. And that means I wasn't struggling with it. It just means that like I wasn't doing it. And I was 10 years sober, and after my home group, we went out to dinner as we often did, and we sat around this table, and I asked this question to my friends. I said, "Hey, do you guys meditate?" And they said yes. And I was like, I'm thinking of giving it a try at like 10 years sober. And this person who's nothing like me, couldn't be further from me. Like we are definitely the two people that you would never think should mix, right? She tells this beautiful story about how she had been sober for 15 years and her sponsee came to her, and her sponsee said, "Hey, like this meditation stuff, like it says we're supposed to do it, we're not doing it. I just kind of feel like if I don't do it, I'm going to be missing out." And what happened for my friend, who was the sponsor in that story, is that she started a practice. She started a daily practice and she started meditating. And so I'm the kind of alcoholic that listens to that story, hangs on every word, listens, and then when she's done telling this beautiful story, I say, "Yeah, but like, were you already retired?" Because like, I'm not somebody who can do hard things, right? I'm not somebody who's going to just like, "Oh, you told me to do it, like I'll take your word for it," right? I took your word for it for the first 10 steps, but now I don't know, like, right? And so I share that story because that's just like who I am. So for whatever reason, the blocks that had been in place like were removed, right? And so I started meditation. And as I started meditation, I came to really enjoy it. And as I came to really enjoy it, I just came to like do it. And so what I've been thinking about, or what I've been feeling in terms of like that time that I sit, I read some books, whatever that looks like, is that it's one thing for me to be a human out in the world and see the loving hand of Creator in an exchange between humans, in birds that chirp, in accidents I'm saved from, whatever. That's one thing. And that's great to recognize the hand of God at work. But like any relationship, like that, what that needs is like, that needs for me to make the effort. It needs for me to like be the one that takes the time. It needs me to make a reach, right? And so I recognize the time that I spend with God these days just feels like nurturing a relationship like I would nurture any other. And that like I actually need to make that reach. And what I also realize is that I don't show up to that practice with an expectation like I used to. And when it feels hard, and when I set a timer for so many minutes, and I tell myself the whole time, don't look at the timer, don't look at the timer, don't look at the timer, and then I do look at the timer and it's only been like 2 minutes, I recognize that that's not a point for me to judge that, but that I've made a commitment to sit and to be with it, to sit and to be with Creator, to sit with myself. And if I'm restless and I'm irritable, that's the commitment that I've made. If I feel like my back's straight and I'm clearing my mind, or I'm recognizing the expression of God's love, that's the commitment that I've made. If I take myself like out of the results business, great things will come to pass. But if I start like wheeling and dealing like a salesman with God and with other people, I'm just pulling the structure down before me. There's a thing that I was going to say, and I think it mattered. The other thing that I just wanted to say is that in the essay, the thing that's always like struck me before, even like just times where I've like spent time reading this essay, is that Bill talks about something called adult love, which felt really scary every time I've read it. And it felt like the reason that it like strips me of like any kind of security is that when we talk, when the phrase adult love certainly makes me feel like I'm somebody who's like wearing a costume, and I'm somebody who's pretending. And I can feel that in my relationship with my wife. And I can feel that among my peers in Alcoholics Anonymous, that I'm just pretending. And it's probably because I am, right? It's probably because there's some level of pretend there. But at the basis of that, I think, is this belief that like I can't really be that good of a human, right? And I see that sometimes when I meet really, really sweet people. Like I have these cousins, they're just really sweet people. They took their honeymoon at Disneyland, you know, like really sweet people. And every time I'm around them, I feel like such a scumbucket, just for no reason. I don't behave badly, but they're just so sweet. I feel like, oh my God, I can't, like I want to hide, right? That's something that I carry around with me every day, right? And so the value of that is either that it's the truth or that it's something that like I could be free of, right? And so I endeavor to be in this relationship with my Creator today for a different experience. And sometimes that means that I just get to have a different problem than I did the day before. And sometimes that means that like I can look the world in the eye. And sometimes that means I can meet a sweet person and not feel like a scumbucket, right? I don't wake up in the morning and think like, how am I going to make myself feel bad, right? But sometimes it feels like the brain is in the business of doing that. What I understand today is that I have alcoholism. What I believe today is that that thing is going to be treated with something, regardless of how active I am in Alcoholics Anonymous. Sometimes that means it's going to be treated with a 10-step or a sponsorship or reading the book or prayer or meditation. And sometimes it's going to be treated with all of the stuff that I shouldn't treat alcoholism with. This time right now in particular is very challenging for me. I'm not having a good time. I don't feel super great about the person that I'm being. I don't feel real super great about the things that I'm doing. So when I read this essay and we talk about dependence as demands, one way to really strip yourself of dependence is to move across the country, is to get married to this woman that you really love in May. Bring all these people that are super fabulous and fantastic to your wedding. Let them shower you with a bunch of love, feel super awesome, like you can conquer the world, and then fucking leave, and then leave and go across the country. I'm sorry. And to just like, take it away, right? And we don't have the community. and that's been disrupted, and we don't have the ability of like seeing a close friend, and we don't have space because people don't have backyards here. It's been really challenging, and it's not something that I want. I am experiencing something that I 100% don't want. Okay, so what I know enough is that I know that it's happening for a reason. And that might sound like a gimmick, like Bill talks about at the end of the essay. That might sound like a gimmick. I understand that that's not a new idea. I understand that that's not a radical nugget of spiritual fitness. But what it does say, what it is a testament of, is it's a testament that I have faith that the same God that relieved me of the compulsion to drink, that I met in step 3 and 6, that carried me through all of the 12 steps, that's carried me through all of these years of sobriety, that what I have faith in is that that creator is there with me in this moment. And I don't believe that I'm just having this experience because God wants me to think I'm a jerk. And I feel like those things are hard to say. I feel like what we do a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous is show up with the story of what happened. At least I feel way less good at sharing what's currently what I'm in the middle of. I would much rather tell you how it ended, how I got through it, you know, what the moral is. But I don't think that that's what emotional sobriety is about. And I don't think that that's what recovery is about. And I don't think that this thing has an ending point. And I think that that's good news. It just doesn't always feel so great. So I'm gonna just stop talking, but I'm super grateful that y'all are here. Thanks for stuff. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Courtney.
Thank you,
Relate to so
Courtney.
much of that.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you. You know, I was thinking a lot about where you were talking about how when you broke up in that relationship that you felt like you made no room just to be yourself and just filled it up with all this stuff. And I remember I was in the same situation. I was on Sundays, I would meet with a sponsee, go to the backroom group, then I would do yoga, then go to another meeting, then box, and I'd pick this guy up from a jail. I'm naming out what I have to do, and I'm like, holy shit, man, that's ridiculous. I mean, that's kind of psycho that you have that much stuff going on. Like, can't you just be and sit, you know, in that kind of uncomfortable, non-planned out deal? But I think I really love the part where you said that the spiritual experience usually begins with telling the truth. And I really loved the humility part towards the end, that, you know, emotional sobriety, when Bill talks about it's a greater humility in relation with ourselves, with each other, and with God, and have that greater humility in relationship with myself to say, hey, it's okay for me to be uncomfortable. Like, it's okay for not everything to go my way right now. I don't even have to have a way, but I can be okay not feeling comfortable. So usually how we do this is we you pick a few people. You can see some people on here, so maybe you just give a shout out to a couple people and let them share, and then we'll open it up.
I pick?
Yeah, you pick.
Oh, okay. I mean, Gary, are you still awake? I can't see you. Maybe you left. I wouldn't blame you.
Yes, Courtney, I'm awake.
Oh, okay. I'm not like, that wasn't supposed, that was supposed to be, okay.
It's funny. It's true.
I'm Gary. I'm an alcoholic.
Gary?
Hi, Gary.
I wouldn't have missed this meeting if I was crippled. I got to tell you, our experiences in the past are brief and fun and pointed and wonderful. And I'm just so delighted to be here and see you again. It's just been great for me. I wish I had your gift to share all that when it's going on. I got to wait till it's hit the fan and I'm just digging out of it. And I just love it. I just love it to pieces. I don't know what I think. I really think our morning when we were sitting in that old officer's quarters there at that fort in Washington and having that conversation, that just seemed to come out of my mouth because it was supposed to. that was not a shot, and apparently it did some good. So, boy, am I glad. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on.
Thanks, Gary. Good to see you.
Hey, Gary, good to see you, man.
Don, do you feel like sharing? Don L.
Sure. I love you so much, Courtney. And I agree, it is such a miracle to be able to talk about
Hey,
your
Don.
Can y'all hear me? Cool. It's such a miracle for you to be able to talk about your experience. And I am so, my heart is so with you, because I met you when I was in so much pain. And I love the fact that when we're in pain, when we're in the place that you're talking about, when the world is not delivering what I thought it was going to deliver, and then I'm standing there in the wake of life, not able to take a drink, not able to live inside my own skin the way that I think it should have been, my unreasonable demands, and Alcoholics Anonymous shows up and bridges me into a new reality. And it is so good to see you. I mean, the pain that I was in when we met on the registration committee was just incredible. And I would love to report to you and everybody else in here. And I'll share this because I lost my husband unexpectedly at 25 years sober. And I stayed sober, and I don't know how many people said to me through that time, I drank when that happened to me. And I realized that was drinking material, the amount of pain that I was in, all that stuff. Alcoholics Anonymous flooded in to my life, carried me, landed me, and I am sitting right now in the back of my van, smiling inside, knowing that that same emotional sobriety, when I can take my hands off the wheel, and my hands got ripped off of the wheel. I too was a runner. I too was agendaed. I lived my life in the next 10 feet. That's how I was like, if you're a runner, you run the 10 feet in front of you. So I lived my life like that as well. Agendaed. And feeling that if I just do these things this way, it's going to turn out my way. Didn't happen. And because of Alcoholics Anonymous and my surrender and my feet that knew the way to walk, which way to turn, take your, self wherever it needs to go to find the people that are going to give you the hand that'll bring you across from the bridge, just across to the shore. And I'm here to report, Courtney, that the smile that you see on my face is genuine. And I say that because I believe that every one of us is confronted with the reality of our lives on a regular basis, that sometimes stuff just doesn't go our way. And if we embrace the unknown of what that looks like, and I can say, here I am again, turn myself in, God, I don't know, I somehow got jacked up again, and the world floods right into my feet. It is that spiritual handshake of me saying, once again, my way doesn't work. And what is it that you want me to do? And when I turn myself in like that, it is miraculous. It is indeed miraculous that I didn't drink, and that I was concerned because I am an alcoholic that I was going to drink. And then I was also concerned that I was going to turn into a shriveled up, bitter person, because I knew what adult love was. And that was the one place I knew about it, which was in my marriage. And I now know about it related to myself and others in an entirely genuine way. And I was taught that because of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was taught that by you. Not entirely, but in part. Your humor is something I desperately needed. that summer. Thank you. Thank everybody in this meeting.
Sam, want to do one more? Or?
Yeah, rock it out. Do one more.
Okay. Is Kate? Are you still here? I can't see anybody. There you are.
Yeah, I'm Kate. I'm an alcoholic. Oh, it was so good to hear you, Courtney. And yeah, I was thinking about that weekend when we were all up in Washington together. And I don't know if you remember this, but yeah, Gary said that to you. And then you came to me and we were talking a little bit and you said, you know what Gary just told me? And I was like, what? And she's like, Gary told me I'm kind of a bitch. And she was like, do you think I'm a bitch? And I was like, yeah, you can be kind of a bitch. And I'll never forget like your reaction to that. It was pretty funny. But you know, I loved your share tonight. I loved your authenticity. It was real. I think it's what alcoholism is, and it's learning to play the game, living with the disease of alcoholism. And, you know, I was thinking when you shared and you were talking about these false dependencies, and I was thinking about another book which says, you know, there should be no false gods before me. And I've got to tell you, the story of my sobriety is going back to my God and saying, okay, so we're kind of back in the same place, but here's what I've put before you this time. Here's my new dependency, you know, that I'm asked to give up. And it's constantly, like you said, it's coming back to the table. You know, I have not arrived, but I keep coming back to the table, you know, and getting served the same message, you know, of recovery. So, you know, I love that you're, you know, a fellow sister to me. We're walking this deal together, and it's so good to see you. And I love your sense of humor, and, you know, keep looking for those bananas.
Awesome. Well, we'll open it up. So please raise your hand on the participant screen, and we'll. Or if you're, yeah, my phone just, or my iPad just died, so I had to jump on and log back in. Do we have any people who would like to share? Let's see, Shelly from California.
Hi, my name is Shelly. I'm an alcoholic.
Shelly.
I used to live in Brooklyn, East 34th Street in U. So I was looking for your accent. Thanks for your share. I had an experience that carried me for 11 years trying to help this alcoholic. And I kept on writing inventory, and I saw I was selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, and afraid. And I took him through the 9 questions, and I saw all that, but there was an attachment that was not breaking. And one day, nobody had wanted to take him to a detox or to a shelter or anywhere. And he came to my house. And my husband was going to work. He says, you're going to call the police because I'm not leaving you here alone. So I called the police, and they took him away. And I was standing on the doorway. I said, even Alcoholics Anonymous couldn't help you. And that's what broke the camel's back. The attachment to helping that person was diminished, and I got free. It was like a mental obsession about how is he doing? Is he getting sober? When's he going to get sober? all that stuff. And I would take him to the coolest people to help him and all that stuff. And it kept me busy and it kept me in excitement, but it was killing me slowly because it was stealing energy from me foolishly and I wasn't even aware of it, or could I turn out of it? So your share was great, you know, to be aware of something like that. And I'm currently working with the word dishonest, which is interesting. Because, you know, you could get away with it. You know, like my sponsor says, you know, cash register honest is kind of hard to get by. So I'm going to try to practice that. I like to get stuff from Amazon and send back something else just for fun, you know, because I think they're big enough to carry it. And then I make amends and then I stop. So this is what's going on. And I'm grateful I could not take myself so seriously anymore. So thank you so much for your share, Peggy.
Then we have, thank you so much, Bradley.
Hey everybody, I'm Bradley. I'm alcoholic. Thank you, Courtney, for the authenticity of the process of being awake and alive and sober. The thing I'm working on, and it's parallels some of the things that you said, and you said so much. Oh my God! And I was listening, truly listening, and loving you through the process. But I'm that guy that can look at a mother who clings to a child that is dying from malnutrition. And I say, my God, can you not see the suffering? And when I'm on the AA beam, what I'm able to say is, as a steward of humanity, how can I be of service? In this moment, what can I do? And when I remember to do that, which I'm going to backtrack, being present in that moment and remembering that perspective takes the kind of preparation that I'm not good at. When I'm hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, it doesn't come easy. And I'm often hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. I'm getting older, so the things I try to do fall through my fingers. So the thing that I learned from listening to you is that when we keep things simple and we do how important is it, and we do first things first, what I get is to be present with the love of all the people that surround us all. And when I'm in this perspective, you guys get so much better. When I'm off the AA beam, all I can do is get stuck in my judgment of where we all fall short. And I'm usually not looking at where I fall short. I'm looking at where you fall short. It's a great indicator of I'm out of balance, I'm off the beam, and I have forgotten my relationship with my higher power. So thanks for being here for my sobriety. That's all I have.
All right. And we have Charles. Charles F. Charles, you there? Hey, Shelly, can you mute yourself? I think when you turn yourself off mute, you never remute yourself. And Charles, you ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, we got it figured out. Courtney, thank you very much. I don't believe in coincidence either, because last Saturday, me and Gary had lunch and to give me my 31-year token. And I was trying to explain to him, you know, how emotional I have been. And taking inventory and doing inventory regularly and thinking, what is it? How come, no matter what, other than, I've been through a lot of deaths lately. My dog died. I went to the graveyard, seen, some past people that's gone, and had just a bunch of stuff going on. But I realized what my problem was, that I was gathering all this old information, is all these old ideas of what I think my life and everything is supposed to be, what it's supposed to look like. And I couldn't put all of this into one big old bag and picture and look at it. But what you put your finger on for me was that if I keep it in now, I can realize, I'm getting old, I'm getting emotional. My grandkids make me cry when I look at them. When I look at my wife and think how blessed I am, I cry like a little baby. That's just God stuff in here. We got rid of all this other stuff, through the steps and working them, and now we're dealing with this new person. And sometimes I don't know how to deal with this new person in here. As long as I'm busy, I'm sponsoring a lot of people, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing, I'm okay with this person. But when I'm not okay with this person is right before I go interact with God. Because then I start thinking, okay, my faults, something I did, something I said, that's something I need to make amends for, and all that inadequacy comes back, and all those old ideas come back. And I need to, deal with those before I go to God. It's kind of like, trust God. I remember people saying, trust God. Well, sometimes I don't trust God because I don't see God the same way as I do when I'm sitting here and I'm seeing God through you and what you're saying and through people. But I think it's just not a coincidence Gary gave me, told me to show up here, and you guys might have a hard time getting rid of me now. So thanks a lot. That's all I got.
Thank you so much. We're so glad to have you. Then we've got Roy H. from North Carolina.
I'm Roy Hoosier, and I'm a grateful alcoholic. Thank you, Courtney. I enjoyed that. It still amazes me. I've been sober a long time. It still amazes me the power of this program and the power of the people in this program and how they assist each other. Over the years, I've had great success in staying sober and working with drunks and having good sponsors and all the good things. I've been married to the same woman for 65 years, and so good things have happened to me. But life also happens. And a few years ago, I was sober 15 years, and I had flashbacks to some combat experiences, and it terrified me, and it took a year to work through it. And the people in Alcoholics Anonymous supported me. I couldn't talk about it, but they knew something was wrong. A few years after that, I had a son in a terrible accident. They had to cut him out of the car. They had to airlift him to the hospital. I was 100 miles away, and I had to drive that 100 miles not knowing if my son was alive or dead. And through all of that, I was able to maintain some kind of serenity. I don't pray for anything particular. I say, ask God to give me what I need. That's all I ever pray for. And a few years ago, I had a grandson, 18 years old, got involved in drugs and alcohol and hanged himself. And I had to drive to Kansas City from North Carolina and stay a week. In all these instances, not a single time did I ever think about taking a drink. The thought of a drink never crossed my mind. I've got a sponsor in North Carolina that some of you probably know, Tom I. Tom's not doing well now. He's in a nursing home with Alzheimer's. But when that boy hanged himself, I called Tom, and Tom said, forget about your grief and forget about your pain. We'll handle that when you get home. Go out there and be of maximum service to your family. And I think I did that. And he said, if you get a chance, pick up a meeting, which I was able to do after about 3 days. And I got to a noon meeting in Kansas City, and the chairman said, Roy, I'm bringing you to Kansas City. And I said, I'm here to attend the funeral of my grandson who hanged himself Saturday. And I've never felt such support from a group in my life. So Alcoholics Anonymous has sustained me for a long, long time. It's folded around me, and it's made me believe that this is what we are and this is what we do. Courtney, I thank you again, and I look forward to being at this meeting again.
Thank you so much, Roy.
Thank you, Roy.
Sorry for your loss. Let's see. We
Thank
got
you, Roy.
Liz H. Liz
Hey,
H.
I'm here. Thank you so much, Courtney. I don't know, when I was reading this essay earlier, the part of the essay where he says, reinforced by what grace I could secure in prayer. And I thought to myself, like, am I secure in grace? I feel like that's a little self-reliant. Like, let me get a foundation, like an insurance policy of grace here. And I know, the way my brain works, I can do that. I can work my program where, I cross my T's and I dot my I's. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But I do think that if I'm not careful, if I'm not aware of the concept of humility, I can start to try and use this program, and, 3 for you and 1 for me. 3 for you and 1 for me. But if I don't get my 1, then everything falls apart. It's not that I'm actually living unselfishly. It's just that I'm a more sophisticated kind of selfish if I'm working my program that way. And then I'm self-reliantly trying to secure my own grace. Like, I don't have any organic virtue, and grace is free. I if my brain tells me that I need to secure it, that I need to earn God's love and grace, then I think I'm in trouble. When I wind up in situations where, my brain is mapping it out, that I'm going to pray, that I'm going to do this, that I'm going to go to a meeting, I'm going to help somebody else, I'm going to hear a 5th step. These things I'm going to do in order to secure the grace that I need in order to kind of micromanage my insides and outsides. That doesn't work. Exactly like what this essay is about. It just doesn't work. I think I don't have any organic virtue. And when I find myself in situations where things aren't going the way that I expect them to now with the spiritual program of action, I have to be humble and say, okay, God, what I'm experiencing now is me without you. Me trying to manage my life without a humble acknowledgement of the fact that the best of me is you. And that I can't control that. I need to be okay with that and grateful for it when I'm in the zone. And when I'm not in the zone, okay, that doesn't change the deal we made. I'm still going to keep doing it. That's it. That's all.
Thank you so much. Good to hear from you. Thanks for reading tonight. Emily?
Hey there, I'm Emily. I'm an alcoholic.
Emily.
Courtney, thank you
Hey,
for coming. So I went to the dentist today, so half of my face is a little off, so I don't normally look like this. I know we're running on time here, but I really want to thank you for just you're such a visceral share. Like I I remember when I first got sober, I feel like I was more honest then, which served me. And now, you know, not that I'm that much, you know, but I don't know. There's been kind of a shift in sort of my ability to tap into my true self, I think, and be authentic, because with time, it's, you know, I've only been sober 5.5 years, but with time, I feel this responsibility to have this sort of image of having it all together. And in doing that, I have found myself saying the things I think are pretty to say. And yeah, so there's definitely been layers to, you know, what I surrender and what, you know, and what I think I know. And I met, I've got a new sponsor I'm working with now, and I met with her yesterday, and she was like, you know, just don't want you to be a good student here. You know, I don't get to figure this out. I don't get to figure this out. It's just kind of something I need to be reminded of. And, you know, the power of this fellowship really, I mean, it's just amazing. I love what you shared, Courtney, on, you know, things that were liabilities, you know, become our strengths. Literally, I mean, it's the job that I have is because I'm an alcoholic, you know, because I've been through this and been arrested and in the hospital. And these are the things that qualify me to, you know, professionally help people as well as just be of service. So I never know what I'm going through how that could be useful to other people. And so it is helpful to hear other folks kind of say that and know that in sobriety, like what I'm experiencing now and this pain that, you know, that I'm in now that I think is useless, is actually not. So it's, yeah, it's always a little, yeah, this meeting is a lot of really strong recovery. So it's always maybe a little intimidating, but I'm so glad. I always get so much hope from this. And yeah, I really appreciate your share tonight very much. So thank you.
So we're almost there. You know, it's interesting the timing. Whenever a lot of times the moderators, how we kind of line up to each other, and I'll find some inspiration. Usually Tom will give me a list, and we'll have a little bit of inspiration, and you watch how it changes you after you've done it, from contemplating this the whole week. You know, like see how this kind of shifts some stuff. It's pretty cool. So with that being said, we're almost done. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Courtney? Anything that you thought about while you were listening to everybody that you'd like to add back in?
No, I am super grateful for everyone.
All right, well, good deal. So this is how we usually close this meeting out with we just mute ourselves and go to our inner room. And for all who care to recite the Lord's Prayer to themselves, we say the Lord's Prayer. Amen. Namaste. Thank you for coming and hanging out. Good time.
Courtney, thank you so much, man. That was great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Courtney.